Welcome to Re-Review, where we watch movies from our past with a perspective from today. Your hosts are Matt, Bobby, and Austin, and we love the films from our youth, so we're taking a look back to see if they still hold up. It's February, so you know what that means? It's a special movie month where we focus on romantic films, so break out the chocolates and flowers. Each of us has selected one love-related film to re-review. That accounts for 3 films this month, so a randomizer is going to pick our 4th movie of love for us. Matt's choice is kicking this off with My Big Fat Greek Wedding. It was released in 2002, directed by Joel Zwick, starring Nia Vardalos, John Corbett, and Michael Constantine. This movie shows us what it's like when cultures collide. Now, this is a fair warning. We're spoiling a 21-year-old movie, so if you haven't seen it, we will be revealing key plot points. Ah, l'amour. Isn't it such a great month, a great time to be alive, watching love films, especially love films about Greek families who don't accept people who are on the outside?
That's the barrier you have to get over, right? That's love. That's Romeo and Juliet, just less murder at the end.
You know, we got a very distinct focus at the beginning of this film. Marry Greek boys, make Greek babies, feed everyone until the day that you die. And clearly this movie is so focused on like culture and the things that are tied to what families have to I'm not going to say deal with, what maybe the youth have to deal with when they're really tied to cultural expectations that family sets upon them and living up to that and what it means when you don't. And that's a really tough premise, you know, to set up. And I think it's also one that does end up being familiar to everyone. This movie was a really big hit back in the day, right?
At the time, I think it was a pretty big. I don't know if it was one of those things where it was like a big hit when it was first released, or if it was like a big hit when it hit like DVD.
It was one of the like highest grossing romantic movies of all time.
Really?
Yeah.
I guess I wasn't in a romantic mood when this movie came out, so I guess I must have missed it initially. It wasn't until like I started dating that I think I got around to watching this.
Especially for its like independent movie status.
Oh, that's true. It was, wasn't it? It was like IFC and her studio, I think, that she'd created for it, production company. I didn't even realize that there was no Universal logo or Paramount at the beginning. This was completely.
Yeah, we really are used to seeing those things. That is kind of wild to think about. That's amazing, highest grossing for sure. I feel like we get some basic, very tropey things that happen here. You know, we get a distinct, at least for what the first quarter, but 30% of the film, we get like a bit of the ugly duckling story, right? We're presented, you know, with a character who doesn't fit the requirements or has not fallen in love as Tula because she's 30. Oh no. God forbid someone in their 30s is not married. Oh no. See, even Siri wants to know why someone in their 30s isn't married. And ultimately, it presents that scenario of she's basically judged by the people that are supposed to care about her more than anyone, saying that she isn't living up to these standards, and that's really tough to have those expectations placed upon you, because she wasn't supposed to do anything more than, you know, get a husband and make babies. Like, this is the life that we choose for you. And really watching, you know, the character of Tula kind of try to come out of that by going to school and getting an education, trying to do work that doesn't mean working in a restaurant. And these are all fantastic things. And maybe for 2002, that was a big deal to show that. But I think what concerns me watching this is I think there's a relatability that probably still exists to this day, because there's a lot of people that probably still treat their family structures like this.
For sure. I think so.
You know, and I think this thing kind of to take into factor with it is maybe, and this is what kind of played into its success at the time, we're a little more used to these kind of stories now, where you think of movies like The Farewell, Crazy Rich Asians, where you get a perspective of a relationship, family dynamic, relationships, and weddings from a perspective other than what you would see in like a Julia Roberts movie, right? You know, those are the kind of movies that we got before this. Having like a different ethnic group being represented in a movie and seeing the way that kind of relationship starts. Like it gives you the whole, beginning, I don't want to say end, but beginning to end type of thing in their relationship, as far as seeing them meet, establishing the family dynamics of like, well, Gus is in charge, in air quotes, right? And the expectations of her being, again, air quotes, older woman who is still single, surrounded by like a sister who was quote unquote prettier and, I don't know, more talented, who got married young and had like 4,000 or 5,000 children or whatever she had. Getting to see that dynamic in a movie like this, I don't think you'd really seen it too much in American theaters at that point. And then getting the cultures collide aspect of it. Because I mean, if you ask me like how many Greek-based movies I had seen prior to this, I couldn't really name too many of them. And being able to see the kind of culture applied, from
Spartacus.
well, I mean, if you go way back, I'm thinking more, at least 19th century. But getting to see that, you see it from Ian's point of view, right? You get to see the things that he considers strange, and even Tula understands that it would be seen as strange, but to the family, it's perfectly normal. And I think that's something that was kind of fresh at the time. And I think that's probably why it was successful as a result.
Yeah, it's almost me considering the idea that I could see it still being something people would connect with. Let's talk about the character Ian. We have someone that comes into the restaurant. Tula sees Ian and is immediately attracted to that long flowing hair. Like who could deny that hair? And is very awkward, in his presence, and sets a thing. I thought there was a really interesting part where he says he's eating the food and he's just like, oh, I really like the spice on this. Like almost it was a throwaway, but definitely that foreshadowing of why I like Greek things as he's eating the Greek food. But then we get their, I guess the real, not the secondary introduction, but the one where he doesn't realize that she's the same person because she's had her glow up. She is now with her makeup, her hair is all did. She's looking great. She's working at a travel agency. And they have this really, I feel like, awkward moment flirting through the window. It didn't like click for me, because I thought initially he remembered her from the restaurant, but then we find out that he didn't.
Yeah.
So I was very puzzled by I'm outside eating from the Greek cart, and oh hey, Greek lady through the window, what's going on?
Yeah. But to me, it's at the same level as like what I'd see in like, You've Got Mail, the kind of interaction that you would see between like a character like Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan. I do think that it is weird that he looks into a window and is flirting with somebody. Like maybe if it was more obvious that she was doing something kind of quirky, I guess, or she was just kind of sitting there talking.
Yep.
And he's just like, yo, what's up? Watch me eat this pita, So it in that you're right in the fact that it turns out that he didn't remember her until a little bit later. He's like, oh, I remember you. And then like, oh,
when they're at dinner on a date.
Was it when they were on the floor talking? I can't remember.
No, it was at the date, because remember he asked about going to her family's restaurant.
Right.
I want to take you to get some Greek food. Yeah. Yeah, I thought that whole flow is interesting, but I guess this is the question here. We're talking about romantic films. At any point, did you love the idea or really feel the connection between two of them as the characters that are falling deeply in love? Did you buy into it?
I didn't actually. To me, there's just so much other stuff going on that like usually like these kinds of movies are very like centric about the couple. Like let's see the couples together and big portions of it on their dates, and then then maybe they have some kind of misunderstanding and then get through it and get back together again. Well, there was none of that in this movie. There was just so much going on that, like, for me, some of the most impressionable scenes in this movie are the family with the dad and the mom and all those other like family members on the Greek side. than the actual relationship. It almost seems like the actual relationship was like secondary to her kind of working everything out with her family.
I mean, is that Matt? At the end of the day, this is a romantic film about the love of family.
I mean, I think it definitely doesn't shy away from the fact that, and I think that this is something that you kind of realize. I think it actually did a good job presenting it this way. I do agree that the beginning of it, the them actually getting together at the beginning was not very well done. I think them being together, they didn't do what most movies do, which is most movies, they don't actually get together towards the end, right? It's more about them forming a relationship rather than being in a relationship, which is something that you rarely see in a lot of movies. Usually they spend all the time seeing the will they won't they dynamic, right? This one
Right.
was like, okay, well, they are, and so it was more about someone like Ian, who is, plain toast, going into this very vibrant, colorful family. And I mean, as someone who's in an interracial relationship, I can say that, you do experience that. I went from a family where, I didn't really think about a lot of stuff like big family gatherings. We don't really do big family gatherings in my family, but on my wife's side, they do. I can't tell you the last time I saw some of my cousins, but I see her cousins all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's one thing that they kind of focus on is the fact that whenever you're in that kind of relationship, there is that juxtaposition between those two different worlds, and you can't shy away from the family. That's just a huge chunk of that's the thing that is the most interesting thing for him, coming from being an only child, being in a very, like, it almost seemed like I wouldn't be shocked like if his dad or his mom were also teachers at some point. So like he's following in their footsteps. So it's a very linear, almost vanilla world, and being able to get introduced into this, you almost had to do that. And the good thing about it is it creates an antagonistic force without having like a villain, right? Those kind of misunderstandings and cultural differences can be barriers for a relationship like that. Those are the challenges you have to go through. So you didn't have to go through, the ex-flame shows up at the engagement party or whatever and throws everything into chaos. Like that's what you would typically see in a movie about a wedding.
I really liked that this movie didn't do that. I mean, I really liked that this movie like kind of like minimized those kinds of things.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the way they present love, and we have that scene where he's already met the family, but she comes to him at the school because she's clearly just in a space like, what are we really doing here? We need to just get away from all the pressures of my family because I love you so much. We need to get away from all that because of the family is what's creating the conflict that we're experiencing. And she asks him the very difficult question of, why do you love me? And, I don't know that his initial answer was satisfying, but he followed it up with, I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make sure that, I will be a part of your family because I know without that, it wouldn't work. And that's where I was like, okay, that felt like the more grounded thing for him to do. And the next thing you know, we see he's getting baptized in a church.
Yeah. If I had a issue with the characters in this, I feel like that scene was a good example of where I had a little bit of problem. It's where I feel like Ian was, and I think Bobby might have actually mentioned this a little bit too. He's kind of more of a passive character because he doesn't bring nearly as much as if I had to say which one was a much more prominent character in this, Gus would be a more prominent character than Ian was. And that's kind of not the greatest thing for your main romantic lead, right? And
Gus was the man.
He was the man. I'll give him that. And maybe it's just because they all do have such grandiose personalities that it makes Ian's much more grounded, in quotes, personality get a little bit overshadowed. And in that scene, it did, it almost felt like, and I think, was it his friend? Might even made a comment about the short hairs or whatever. And I think that was what he's trying to get at, was like literally like, you're just kind of getting steamrolled here, it seemed.
Right.
Just going along with the flow.
Right. I mean, like, I think would have been really helpful is like to have show some kind of gesture from him to show that, like, because he seemed to just be, instead of just going with the flow, like show something like, hey, like, And you did see kind of like a progression of him kind of bonding with the brothers, like them like making fun of him and him kind of being like, okay, I don't really know what to make of this. And then towards the end, like him like chasing them, like being part of it and kind of understanding what's going on. And I liked that. But I think really would have helped me kind of solidify him as a character was just show him like do something, like take something on his own, like instead of like her saying like you need to be baptized, like make it be his idea or
Yeah, but he's
not the
also
bapt
learning about their process, right?
right. But like he didn't like he's an educated dude, like couldn't he have gotten like a Greek book or whatever and like read a Greek book, like this is
The
like
the fact that the fact
like
that we know that Google doesn't exist at this time, where he could just Google it.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
But I do agree, Bobby. I think that's a really good point. I think that if he would have been proactive in being the one who was like, he suggested the compromise or whatever, right? It didn't.
Mhm.
It was kind of implied in the fact that in the conversation that Austin was talking about between the two, like, why do you love me? And he's like, you're my whole world, and like I'll do anything. I feel like if there was a scene, maybe there was a scene, maybe it was cut out because the pacing was off or something, where he
Mhm.
was like, went to Gus and was like, how about if I got baptized in the Greek church? That would make me Greek, with that.
Mhm.
Cause like that, that was my whole thing during the entire movie. If she showed up with this tall, handsome Greek guy, would the issues be non-existent? Like, yeah, he didn't ask for permission, but if he would have been Greek, would that have been was that literally the only thing? Or was it the fact that, he was a dad, like father of the bride, terrified of his daughter being taken away and, you
Mhm.
know, all this? I feel like it was more about the Greekness more than anything else.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that with the title and the way they approached this from that family perspective, I think I just got frustrated with Ian as a my life is was boring until I met you, or when they have that quintessential scene in the locker hall, and his answer was because I came alive when I met you. Like, dude, what were it was your life? This is really your issue with your life that you're like, let me go jump into this Greek family with all their nonsense, and I'm a vegetarian, and they're gonna feed me lamb.
I do remember you groaned a little bit during that. It probably wasn't
Just
the best line, and they probably could have established it a bit better. It it does feel that it was kind of a dig on the fact that he was. I mean, like, poor guy. He's tall with flowing hair from a rich family, and good job, and like,
okay, let's live in this world. Your family is absolute. They're overbearing. They're trying to control everything about who you date, and let's say you do find that person, and they're outside of it. They're not in your culture, but then they're imposing, all of the ways that they do things on you in this relationship. So you have to ask permission for marriage, or you have to participate in our religious ceremonies in order to show your devotion to, your significant other. Is we're talking about this is a review, right? We're looking back in the past. How much weight do you feel like this is carrying for people today to participate in those things in that same manner?
would somebody in modern times go through that amount of effort to?
We say modern, and we're talking 21 years.
Uh, I don't know.
Would you demand that of your child?
Oh,
Would you demand it? You have a daughter who's getting married. I demand to be asked for
that
permission.
this is a good Bobby question, actually. Bobby, your daughter shows up with Eon Miller, long flowing hair, vegetarian Eon Miller, without your permission, and they say they're getting married. Actually, I
Yeah,
guess
I
they,
mean,
they they met at dating, right, first, but then they got married, or they're getting married.
yeah. I mean, I think that I mean, the most important thing to me is that my daughter is treated with respect, right? I used to be think that I was going to be like the baseball bat dad, like whoever whatever dude shows up, I'm like just going to be standing there with like a baseball bat and being like, "You hurt her, I'll, break your legs or whatever," like the brothers did in the movies or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But then I realized like a good father would respect his daughter's decision because she is raised correctly and she knows that like okay, like not to Like there was the thing that he said about his that like kind of stuck out to me about, oh well, if she goes to school, she's gonna, like do drugs or like maybe not do drugs, but like, like get pushed over her and like become like a drug mule, right? Like I think that at some point you have to rely on your parenting and let your parenting take over and let your children out into the world and say, okay, I hope I've done a good enough job to teach them, how to take care of themselves and not have to be the one with the baseball bat. So I think it's a very difficult thing for families and parents. And
I think that's a very high level answer because I feel like there's a lot more Gus's out in the world than we want to admit.
Well, I feel like if you really think about it, all these kind of wedding movies, it's almost always the perspective of the dad and the daughter.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I've seen anywhere it's like maybe one with the Jennifer Lopez Monster-in-Law movie where like the mom's like super famous and like she's very overprotective of her son, but it's almost always the father and the daughter situation.
Sort of an expectation the society places on how men approach their daughters.
They're princesses, right? They're little girls. So,
and it's true in my case. So
But no baseball bat for you.
no baseball bat for me.
That's mighty fine of you to not want to consider to lock your daughter down as if she's yours and yours only. We look at that and we watch as the story kind of unfolds from there, and we get a lot more large family gatherings. So they meet Ian's parents. What is it? A large family gathering on the front lawn where they're cooking meat, and she gets a bundt cake and they feed them lots of booze and everyone's feeling weird and wild. And then, we get to the, wedding day, and what do we see? Just again, large family emphasis. And ultimately it
But all on her family. His family was
yes,
what, like 2 people?
it was
Maybe
it was
maybe 2 other people, including his one bald friend.
that's the only thing you remember about his friend is that he's bald. Like what's his name, Bobby? What's his name?
Baldy. I don't know.
Oh no. Baldy is not the answer. Oh my goodness gracious. Well, I mean, is there a judgment being made here for is it safe to assume that a family who is not large and does these gigantic gatherings is somehow boring? That these people haven't lived their life?
It is kind of judgmental in a way, if you really think about it. That
Yeah,
it does perceive their family as boring, as like even cut. Like I think they did this cut right where they cut between her family and then they cut to his family at dinner, and like the music change and like there's that cough sound that will come up, and it's just that awkward silence that comes up, and it's like, but in their world
they did go out there and start drinking and start dancing, so they kind of meshed in. So it wasn't like it was like total like standoffish and not gonna be a part of this at all. There was genuine effort made, which I thought was heartwarming.
But I guess that to me, that's the real question of the movie entirely. Not even just that one scenario. It's conformity. They're mishing on their side, but did the Portocalis, was that what the last name Portocalis family? What did they do to kind of go the opposite direction? Like, what did they do to meet them halfway? Same thing with, the whole idea that like she didn't really have a life until she started, putting makeup on and putting contacts in and stuff. Where was the compromise between the two, or is it just from Ian's family that they had to adapt to the Greek family? Like my biggest thing that I was thinking about when I was watching it was the idea of, who had the biggest arc in this movie, and the only one I could really think of was Gus.
Yeah, and really, he's the one we saw challenged with his beliefs, because oh boy, did he believe some crazy things.
There were some things
should
said.
Not be educated. I think once he said that, I was like, "Oh, here we are. I guess we've just reached the point where the old man is just saying the things out loud."
Right.
But in terms of the change, yeah, I guess he would represent that because when the family comes up and he introduces everyone who's part of his family, all the Nicks, the 10,000 Nicks that are in there.
Diane.
And then, but the way he hugs them and kind of says, I'm doing what I can to accept you. And we see his frustration with them later. But you're right. It's definitely that kind of growing into, I do love my daughter, so I have to be willing to change.
Mm-hmm.
But it still doesn't feel like that much because as we get to the end of the film, so what was their gift? They got a house.
Mm-hmm.
Where was that house?
Yeah, right next to him. And I mean, it was still she got married, so that's what he wanted, was her to get married and have kids, and that's what she did, even though it wasn't to a Greek guy. Like, real change would have been for her to just stay the same that she was in the very, very beginning of the movie and not get married and not have any kids, and him to still like show his total support for her.
That man was not that. That would have been amazing though.
And then what was up with the art where the dude was like, "Hey, look, here's my art," and he
you know what? You're right. They never finished anything with that.
I mean, they did say at the end, like he was talking to his sister or whatever, and saying like, "Hey, you are the one who, did your dreams, and you're not working at a restaurant anymore, so I'm gonna follow you." Like, but he never got his father's
approval.
Yeah.
No, but
so
I do feel that was mostly put in there to establish that he wasn't just misogynistic or anything like that. The dad,
right?
He was more about traditions, and he didn't really, he had these kind of mental expectations for his children to not exceed those expectations, right?
You need to work in my restaurant.
Yeah, it's like, it kind of, I felt like that was kind of the ongoing theme in their family, was everyone had a place, and deviating from that place and that path threw everything into chaos. And so that's just why he probably tried to ignore it. But they should have wrapped it up a little bit better for the brother.
Just a movie about control. That's all this is. Who has the power?
The one with the money who can give away houses has the power.
You're not wrong. Buy me a house, Papa Gus. I will take it and marry a Greek daughter for you.
Yeah, that guy, the baldy guy, man, he should get on that. He should start looking for a Greek woman.
Oh my gosh. All right, Bobby, we're starting with you. You recommending this film?
Yes, it's a quintessential independent romantic movie that should be watched, whether you know Greek or not.
I felt like you read that from like a copy somewhere.
The back of the DVD review. I just see the DVD case going into frame. It's like, starring blah blah.
Matt, do you recommend this one?
I think that it's worth watching if you're in a mood to watch a romantic movie that's a little bit different than the norm. I think if you're trying to watch something that gives a different perspective to a romantic movie, I think it's a good watch.
Yeah, I'll agree. I found the movie to both be like cute and painful simultaneously.
I agree. It was pretty awkward.
I think it accomplished what it needed to do. We definitely talked through our pain points, but still watch it. I get why everyone's into it. I do. I really do. Well, as always, thank you for listening. And remember, there's two kinds of people, Greeks and everyone who wishes they were Greek.